Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session by Total Alignment Charitable. My name is Mina, and in Black, I'm a co-executive director of Total Alignment Charitable, and I'm here with my co-executive director.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Massole.
And today we're going to be talking about money mindset moves and how our mindset can impact our ability to actually make the moves we want with our finances to reach our goals. So we're going to kick off with the conversation. Today's conversation is really about how our mindset impacts some of the things that we do. But as you listen to today's session, I want you to think about a few things that may come to mind. And a few things that may come to mind is think about how the things that you learned as a child impacted you and impacts your current approach to wealth and money management. And also think about how you deal with other people and how your mindset and how you deal with other people and how you interact with other people when it comes to how you view how they use their money and also how you use your money. So I'm going to kick it over to Christina to get us started.
Yes, thank you so much, Mina. Great. Everyone, hello. Thank you for participating. And so, one of the things that people think is that money is very calculation driven, right? And you have to be good with numbers. You do have to know how to add and subtract, but it's basic mathematics. We're not talking about calculus here or derivatives and all of these other things. But money is really about our behaviors, right? And the root behaviors that we take that will definitely allow us to understand how someone handles their finances, right? And so, for instance, let's say someone came to me at Total Alignment Charitable. We provide free financial plans to individuals. And someone came and I'm looking at some of their transactions. You can tell a lot about a person's not only finances, but they're also their behaviors by looking at their transactions, right? So making good financial decisions is more about mastering your financial behaviors, right? So let's give you some examples. I could not believe the stat. About in 2024, approximately $113 billion was spent in lottery tickets in the United States. On lottery tickets. Now, for me, I'm not into lottery tickets, and listen, if you are, that's fine. But there are people who are do this every single week. They take a portion of their paychecks and they're putting money into lotto tickets, believing that there will be some type of payoff. Meanwhile, so that's a behavior. The behavior is okay, I'm going to put my money into this. The odds of me winning is extremely low, right? But let's say if that same person changed the money mindset and the same behavior of consistently doing something and taking that money every week or every other week when they get paid and putting it actually into an investment, the behavior is good. The underlying behavior in terms of consistency, it's something that makes sense. But what people are putting it into does not make sense because the odds of you getting a return from that it's very slim to none. And let's also talk about some other behaviors. I hear people all the time, they tell me, oh, I have to do retail therapy. This happened, and now I decided to go and treat myself. The treat myself generation, and it's all ages. And when I say generation, it's literally all ages. And people have this phrase of, oh, well, I deserve it. And then what happens is we're not being disciplined, right? When it comes to finances, or we're not being patient to actually say, you know what, I'm going to wait and see if this item is actually on sale. And generally, what happens if we give ourselves some guardrails and guidelines, such as a spending plan or a budget, we can still do the things that we want to do and live the life that we want to live, but within the context of a budget or a spending plan. So, for instance, I tell people if your thing is to vacation, if your thing is certain entertainment, do not deprive yourself of that. Like, I am a New York Liberty fan. I'm going to go to some basketball games, right? So that has to be included in my budget. You too, should allow yourself to have things that you enjoy in your budget. Now, your budget is based on your capacity, your financial capacity, right? So for instance, if the income that's coming in for you is $65,000 after taxes, right? Let's just work with that number. And you have to pay, you live in New York City, and half of that is going to your rent. And then the more of that is going to your groceries. And let's say you, by the time you're finished paying everything off, you have $10,000 left in the year, and you have to make a decision. How am I going to use this money? You definitely include some of that in there for maybe your entertainment. So maybe from that 10,000, maybe 20% of it is going to something that you want, and the rest, some of it is going to savings, some of it is going to paying down debt, some of it is going into investing. So you can have the things that you want, but we have to change the behaviors, right? The impulse decisions, looking at how we are with risk. So we talked about that lottery example. That was one example where there is no risk reward relationship there for me, in a sense of the odds of me actually getting a return. That's not considered an investment. But if I do take money consistently and putting it into an asset that can appreciate, and I'm taking risks though, I'm still taking risks. Let's say I wanted to buy Apple stock. It's still a risk putting money into Apple. But the likelihood, this is a sound company, a mature company, there'll be ups and downs. But in the long run, guess what? People are still going to buy phones. People are still going to go to the App Store, right? And get the downloads and things that they need. So we want to think about budgeting. We want to challenge ourselves with some of the narratives that we tell ourselves, that we're bad with money. You're not bad with money. Everything is different for all of us. We're all raised differently by different people, and that all influences our behaviors with money. Do you purchase things coming from a place of insecurity? That's a big one, because sometimes when people look at the root cause, and we're talking about behaviors here, when you look at the root, okay, am I actually spending because I desire to have something that someone else has? So, there's a lot of things to consider. But we talked about budget. You may want to automate some of your savings as well. You may want to visualize yourself. Okay, I'm gonna look and see where do I want to be, and the lifestyle that I want to have, and now let me set up my budget and my finances as well as income coming in accordingly. So money is more about your behavior, right? The second thing I'm going to talk about before I turn it over to my colleague is something called time in the market, right? Or the role of time in compounding interest. And so compounding interest is essentially your money that you invest, it earns interest, right? And then that interest earns interest on top of itself. And it goes on and on and on indefinitely, right? And so this is huge. This is powerful. And Albert Einstein was quoted as saying that compounding interest is like the eighth wonder of the world, in the sense of, if you understand how it works, you're going to earn it. And if you don't understand how it works, you're going to pay for it. And so it's incredibly powerful, but you have to give yourself time. I'm not the most patient person sometimes, and many of us are not. I'm not going to sit up here and lie to you. As I've gotten older, I'm still young, still 25. I've learned to be more patient with things, but sometimes, let's be honest, we don't want to wait. But I was listening to an audio book, Justice Katanji Brown Jackson, and she said that she set a goal. Well, she wrote it in, I believe, in her college essay, that she was going to one day literally become a Supreme Court justice, and something about performing like in a play. And 34 years later, that dream was realized. of that goal that she set, right? And so just think about that 34-year time frame while she's working, I'm, continuing, I'm sure there's challenges and things that she had to overcome. It is going to be the same thing when you put your money into some type of vehicle and you want it to compound. And when I say vehicle, I'm talking about an interest or appreciating asset, whatever that may be. It could be real estate, it could be stocks, it could be bonds, it could be mutual funds. We are not actually giving anyone financial advice here. Disclaimer, we're not telling you what you should invest in. But think about that. I was thinking about like, wow, 34 years until the dream is realized. It is literally the same thing. In your time horizon, all of those years she was compounding her knowledge, compounding her work experience, and building and building and building on to get to that level. So imagine if we had a mindset that was, you know what? One, it's going to happen if I keep doing this. And if I have to think about long term. I have to think about keeping the investments here. We've seen different markets at different time periods where markets have completely dropped, going into what's called a bear market, if they've dropped to a certain more than a certain point. When we're talking about financial markets here, we've seen these things and we've also seen them come up and do extremely well. And so what happens is we have to ride those waves, and we have to have the mindset that, okay, I'm going to put some money into savings, I'm going to put some money into investments, so that over the years to come, I can actually see a return on my money. So you always want to think long term. We're not traders. We don't advise people in the sense of being a trader. We want people to not drink. We want people to think in terms of long a longer horizon, whether that be 10, 15, 20 years. You want to be patient, and you want to remove emotions from the situation. So just remember that there is power in compounding interest, and you want to definitely do that. There's an example of a man named Ronald Reed. He went from a janitor to a philanthropist, right? And I'm sure Mina can share more details there about his story. But he was a janitor, and he was literally investing his money over his lifetime. And then by the time he died, he was able to actually leave an inheritance to his family and to organizations he cared about. And so think about compounding interest and time in the market. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Christina. So, as you can see, there are some mindset shifts that you need to have and that we should all have when it comes to how we approach our money management. And I want to take a few minutes to talk to you about some of the other ways that, unfortunately, our mindset can impede our progress when it comes to reaching our financial goals. So, one of the mindset shifts that I want to make sure that we pay attention to is something that you probably may or may not have heard of, which is the difference between a wealthy person and a rich person. A wealthy person is someone that I think most of us don't realize. They tend to be a bit more subtle in terms of the amount of money they have. A rich person, on the other hand, rich people, unfortunately, we tend to think we see somebody who's a bit more flashy. Their wealth is essentially something that is almost like seen, if you think about it. And what you and I think most of us should aim for is kind of the wealthy approach, which is it's not about the flashy, it's not about having the latest clothes or the most trendy outfits or the most trendy bags or whatever it is that it is the trend du jour. It is about essentially wealth is true wealth is really about kind of a quiet lifestyle and the subtlety. There's this story about how Warren Buffett for decades drove the same car. And to this day, he still lives in the same house that he's lived in for decades, even as a billionaire, a very humble house, right? And I think most of us have the tendency to think that to show our wealth, we need to be, to show our wealth or to be wealthy. The wealthy are the ones that we see on all of these social media platforms that are a bit more flashy, right? And I think one of the things that we have to think about is the flashy cars, the designer clothes, the expensive cars, the expensive houses. these things that people can see often doesn't necessarily mean that the person has a lot of money, right? Whereas wealth is what they say is largely invisible, right? Investments are you don't necessarily always see someone's investment, right? Sometimes, obviously, if you see their real estate portfolio, you may be able to see the real estate. You may be able to see their cars if they are into like vintage cars or cars that retain value, right? But um, I think true wealth for most of us, one of the things we have to change about mindset is that what we see like right in front of us, like the flashy, the big, showy ways that some people approach money and approach richness is not necessarily conducive to long-term retention of wealth, meaning that most of those people, unfortunately, sometimes go bankrupt because they're always trying to keep up with the Joneses, right? What we really want to focus our mindset on is freedom over flash. And what that means is there's a great saying that wealth buys options. And I think all of us would love the opportunity to have options when it comes to how we live our lives. And what that means is we want to be able to choose um, the vacations that we take. We want to be able to choose the schools that we send our kids to, meaning that if we want to send our kids to the most expensive and best top tier school, then we have that flexibility. If we want to be able to work and take sabbatical, work in our 9 to 5 and take sabbatical, we can do that. We can do that. And we want to be able to, if we choose not to work at all, we can do that. If we decide we want to retire early, we can do that. I think there's one of things that most of us don't think about when it comes to wealth, which is while all of these things that we may see when it comes to the mindset of the wealthy versus the wealthy do choose the freedom over the flash, meaning that they want to be able to choose how they live. They want to be able to choose. They want to be the flexibility and the financial freedom to choose where they live, where they stay, like how they dress, right? And it's not always about the flashy. Bill Gates, I'm sorry, not Bill Gates. Steve Jobs was notoriously known for wearing his black turtleneck and jeans, right? That was his essentially his uniform. There's, I think, one of them things that he and I think people like him have said and that I've seen them say is that the reason they do that is because they don't want to have to think about what they have to wear every day, which is really a really way they can afford to wear whatever they want, right? Or whatever they want because they are wealthy, right? They don't need to constantly show strangers their wealth, right? Because it's kind of again, wealth is subtle, wealthy or the wealth is subtle when it comes to those people. One of the other mindset shifts that I think we all need to be really aware of is how we think about net worth and income. So some people think that if I make a lot of money, then I must be automatically wealthy. Well, that's not always the case. You can make a lot of money, but you can also, when I say make a lot of money, I'm talking about your salary, essentially your salary or income from your like your job or your business, right? You can make a lot of money, but that doesn't really matter um, that doesn't matter if you have a lot of expenses. One of my dad's favorite sayings is it's not how much you make, it's about how much you keep. And there are many people that will have a high salary, but they have nothing to show for that high salary. So just keep that in mind when it comes to how you think about wealth and how some of the money moves that you make. Well, it's not necessarily about just the income; it's about your net worth. And if it is about the income, it's not necessarily the salary or wages, right? It's about income from your investments. So think of it that way, like your cash flow from your investments, the income from your investments, not necessarily like your 9 to 5 income. That's not to say, obviously, the 9 to 5 and the income from your business is not going to help add to your net worth, or it's not going to help add you can't use that to buy and invest more. What I'm saying is that just because somebody makes a lot of money doesn't mean that they're saving a lot of money. They're investing a lot of money. So just something to be mindful about how our mindset may need to shift a little bit, right? One of the other money mindset things I think we should be mindful of. One of the money moves that we should be aware of is lifestyle creep. And this is a big one that happens to a lot of us, meaning that when the lifestyle creep, for those of you that know, is like as our income or our salaries increase, our lifestyle expenses also increase to try to keep pace, essentially, not to try to keep pace, but essentially keep pace with our the increase in our income. And that while you may think, well, that makes sense, you make more money, then obviously you can afford to live a little bit differently than you currently do. The challenge, though, that most people run in when it comes to our mindset is we often think, oh, well, because I make more, then I can afford to do X amount and more. But unfortunately, we don't necessarily, the percentage, excuse me, the ratio is not always equivalent, right? Our income may go up 50%, but our expenses may go up like 60, 70, 80%, right? And unfortunately, it ends up whereby we're in a hole. So it's just something for you to think about as you consider your lifestyle and as you can consider as your income increases over time. Think about what lifestyle creeps and are happening. Do a check in with yourself. Do a check in with your family. Do a check in with whoever you partner with as far as your finances go, and really think about, okay, I'm making X amount of money this year. How does that compare to last year, right? And how does more so, most importantly, how do my expenses from this year compare to my expenses from last year? And is there a lifestyle creep happening that I may not necessarily be aware of, right? So just something to think about is the lifestyle creep. Right. One of the other money mindset shifts I think most of us need to make when it comes to the wealthy versus rich is really value based spending. Now, this is something that I think can get us in trouble, which is for most of us, we don't necessarily spend according to our values. We spend according to, we just sometimes unfortunately end up in this space of just buying stuff, right? And a few years ago, the minimalist lifestyle became almost trendy for whereby people really wanted to focus on just almost kind of decluttering and getting rid of a lot of the stuff they accumulated over the years. But I think one way to kind of fix the challenge of just accumulating stuff is really focus on value-based spending. Spend on the things that matter to you, spend on the things that are important to you, right? If education is a big deal to you, then make sure that you spend accordingly. Christina mentioned that she loves New York Liberty. Well, she spends some of her money. She budgets for the New York Liberty, right? She budgets for those basketball games. So I think it's important for us to really think about the things that we value, the things that make us happy, right? And how we can essentially prioritize those things and make sure we're being intentional about where our money goes, right? And that goes to the causes and things that we actually really care about, right? The other kind of difference I think that can come in play is when it comes to wealth versus the wealthy versus the rich is really kind of the safety net that wealth provides to the wealthy versus those that are rich. Unfortunately, for some people that are rich, right, there really is not that safety net because they're constantly trying to keep up with the Joneses. They're constantly trying to outdo the other person. And you'll see this on Instagram and you'll see this on some of the social media platforms whereby the person is really going out of their way to showcase and highlight all of this wealth that they have, all of this stuff that they have, all of this, whether it's like the designer luxury bags, the big maybe home, their trips on their private jet, whatever it is, whatever it is that they want to showcase for you to believe that they are quote unquote rich, right? I think we need to really look at it and look at it with a kind of a clear eye as far as well what's going on behind the scenes. Because one thing that we've come to learn is there's a lot of fakeness and facade going on in some of these. Like, oh, I remember a few years back reading an article, and it was about how some of the influencers and some people that were trying to keep up with the Joneses, they were renting private jets, essentially, not like a photo shoot private jet. So they go and take a few pictures on the jet, and then that was it. Like to show people that look at me, I'm wealthy, blah blah blah. Look at me, I'm wealthy. But it wasn't really that they were wealthy, or heck, even they were rich, but their mindset needed to shift because for them it was about the image and versus um, the actual accumulation and building their own investment portfolio, right? So just something to be mindful of. Some practical things that you may want to consider doing is really think about what are rich purchases that you've done in the past, and what I mean by that is what are the things that you've purchased or acquired in the past that don't necessarily align with the idea of being a wealthy person. So if you bought a luxury bag or a designer outfit, or you moved into a house that you know you couldn't afford, or you put a particular item on credit card that you know shouldn't have, right? That all of those can be signs of trying to put forth the image of being a rich person versus actually thinking long term and thinking strategically about what it means to be wealth. I went to an event not too long ago, and it was a fantastic event. A new sustainable clothing line. And one of the things that I really appreciated was that the clothing line's price point was a little expensive, right? It was a little expensive. And one of the people in the audience, she was a younger person. She was in college, I believe, and she asked a question which I thought was really poignant, which was, well, so how can you've talked about like your clothing line. She was talking to the creators. Look, clothing line being great, and I love the clothes, but they can be a bit out of my price range. Being a college her words are like something like broke college students, right? How can someone like me afford it? And the creator of the lines, there were two people, said something I thought was really important, and I think most of us don't understand or um, don't understand, which is she said, well, we are about quality. And for if you want something quality, then go ahead and set your money aside. And you know what? Go ahead and buy it when you are ready, right? Set your money aside because we live in and I thought that was such an important point for her to make because we do live in an instant gratification world whereby we want this now, we want this, we want to be able to afford this now. But she said something I thought was really, really key, which was, you know what? Instead of like, okay, let me see how much I'm gonna like scrounge this together, is really take your time and shift your mindset. Like buy that quality piece that will last you 10 to 20 years, which their clothing will last you 10 to 20 plus years, right? And you can even possibly pass it on to their products. It wasn't just their clothing, pass it on to the next generation, right? And that is something that to me that's meaningful to me, that's value based spending because it is something that'll last a long time versus one of these things that like buying something that'll um last maybe a year if that, and then boom, like it's tearing apart and falling apart. So just something to think about is really think about what it means, how the wealthy live, and the people that created line, like they were out, they had money, obviously. But I think it's very interesting to think about how the wealthy approach things, which is really you want to spend your money wisely. You want to spend your money on quality versus the things that will fall apart next year, and then you're back to having to spend money again, right? So just something to think about when it comes to how like the wealth mindset versus the rich mindset. Two really interesting ways to approach your finances. Now, shifting gears real quick, I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about another money mindset shift that I think we all should make, which is kind of the emotional side of money. The emotional side of money for most of us is we feel like emotions like fear, greed, jealousy, they can dramatically influence how we actually approach our money and how we actually approach our finances, right? And it's hard sometimes for us to recognize and manage those emotions. For example, have you been, if you go to any store, one of the things, especially at some of these convenience stores or some of these like pharmaceutical stores, when you go, even the grocery store, what do you see when you get near the checkout counter, when you're near the cash register? What do you see? You see little odds and ends for you to buy, right? To grab and put it onto the cash register and pay for it, right? So those are impulse buys can really be, there, some of these shops are counting on our emotional side, our emotions being like, oh, okay, let me just grab this and go, right? Let me just grab this and go without really thinking about. And you notice they're often at a certain price point, like a lower price point, right? Because this is not supposed to be something that you're going to bulk at when you look at the price point. You just, oh, let me grab this and add it to my cart and go, right? Add to my cart and go. So I think when it comes to just how we think about money, money is a very private thing. It's a very private conversation we have with ourselves, we have with other people. And I think it's something that unfortunately sometimes can lead us to avoid certain conversations and avoid certain topics. So, for example, for some of us, we don't want to talk about insurance. We don't want to talk about estate planning. We don't want to talk about these topics that may that deal with perhaps long-term planning or even topics that may address like things, the topics, excuse me, things like death, right? Some of us avoid the conversation about life insurance for the simple fact that it means talking about what happens to your what you want to be done with your finances in the event you're not here, right? And that's for some people a lot, very, very hard pill to swallow. But again, that's the emotional side of money, right? If you come at it with a kind of a clear level head, right? Um, this is more so less about contemplating kind of mortality and more so about just your financial legacy, right? How you want to be, what you want to leave to your loved ones when it comes to like estate planning, or how what you want to be done, how you want your bills to be paid in the event that you're not here. So when it comes to the emotional side of money, it's really important for us to really think about how our emotions can sometimes really get the best of us when it um, comes to how we approach our money, um, how, our current spending environment. So one thing to think about is I mentioned earlier was think about how your childhood and what you learned in your childhood impacts your day to day approach to how you manage your money. It's really, really interesting because the money scripts that we learned as a child, whether it was direct, intentional, or even indirectly, right? Whether it's from our parents or from our guardians or whoever was around us, we've been taught, if you've heard consistently, hey, we can't afford that, or hey, you can't have that, or oh, that's too expensive. Oh, why would you buy that? It does impact it. It has a way to kind of sneak into your adult life as you get older because you'll start to see things from that perspective, right? So if you hear it enough times, you do start to see it as as from that perspective, and it becomes part of your money script and it becomes part of your money story, right? So I think those type of money stories and that money script is very hard to change because it is so tied to our childhood. It is very tied to our emotions, and we do have this almost visceral reaction to certain topics based on how we responded to things. So these things when we were younger. So just something to think about is when it comes to money and emotions, it is very hard for us to separate the two. But it is a good idea to every once in a while just take a deep breath, stop what you're doing, take a deep breath. I often like to tell people if you can, just if when it comes to like working on a budget or even paying the bills, you know what? Run some good ambiance music, you know, like just try to de-stress the environment as much as possible. If you can want, you can play some spa music in the back. Some SPA music in the back, and really kind of make it so that it's a bit light and airy so that you can actually push through. Because for some people, there is some anxiety that shows up when it comes to how we deal with our money, whether it's paying the bills or feeling anxious about our job or our career or whatever it is that we're working on. So just some things to think about when it comes to the emotion side of money, right? It's really important for us to pause before purchases, and it's very important for us to really try and do our best to try to think long term and think about the future and think about how the future may impact um, the future may be impacted by what we are doing today, right? Now, real quick, I want to make sure that I talk a little bit about what it means to stay wealthy versus getting wealthy. For some of us, we spend our time really focused on just accumulation, right? And I really want to talk about what it means to actually shift over from accumulation to preservation. And what that means is it's one thing to build it; it's a whole other thing to actually preserve and keep the wealth, right? Um, Things like diversification, whether it's like the asset type, meaning the different securities and assets that you actually invest in, like real estate versus like gold, right? Being very conscious about the spending that you do, being prudent about the spending, and continuously saving can help you kind of have a long-term approach to your wealth and a long-term approach to security and your finances. So something to think about is it is very important to try to do your best to sustain the wealth that you build up. Oftentimes, when we talk to clients, we talk to them from the standpoint of, well, the very first thing when you do when you get paid is pay yourself, right? And you want to make sure that not only do you pay yourself, you don't touch that money, right? And this can be a little interesting because every once in a while we encounter people that say, "Well, I don't pay myself first because I want to. I'm just I want to get the bills paid and just get that out of the way. But it's very important for you to pay yourself first so that you can live to fight another day, as it were, right? And it's obviously we're not saying don't pay your bills. Our goal here is to kind of create a budget like the 50/30/20 budget that'll allow us to put a little bit in each bucket, right? So if it's possible, the goal here is to kind of shift our mindset when it comes to being able to not only accumulate but keep the wealth that we right. So if one of the things that most people uh, don't realize is that when it comes to wealth, it is very important to not only avoid lifestyle inflation, so that you can actually keep the wealth that you accumulate, right? It's very important for you to really be humble about how you're approaching your wealth. And what that means is success has a habit of breeding overconfidence, and we have a good day in the stock market, we think, hey, I can do better, I can do more. And then the next day, this market crashes, and you're like, oh my goodness, what have I done? Right? And so it's really important for us to be very mindful and stay the course and have a long term view of our finances. Again, going back to the conversation about emotions, the long term view is what's really going to kind of temper those emotions so that we can actually think about, okay, what is it that I'm really trying to achieve here? What is the goal that I'm really trying to achieve here? And if the goal is whether it's to save for a house, to save for your child's education, to save for your retirement, to travel the world, to take a once in a lifetime world trip, whatever that goal is, we need to make sure that we have enough saved up for the long haul, right? And in order to do that, we need to be really mindful, and really not just focus on the short term, and really keep our emotions out of it, and figure out a way for us to really not take the money out of the market. Warren Buffett has a saying that says the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. And if you know what that means, it means don't essentially go and dip into that bucket or into that pot prematurely, because we have a tendency to do so. Some people have this habit of, if the market is going down, well, let me just go ahead and take the money out and put it to the side and try to save as much as possible. But the market's going to go back up again. Now you've missed out on the upswing. You missed out on the upswing. So just something to keep in mind. Another thing about the difference between getting wealthy versus staying wealthy is liquidity matters, right? Wealth on paper is great, like your investments, your stock investments, your real estate investments, your art and collectibles. Those type of investments are great. However, you need to also make sure that you're keeping something accessible so that when an opportunity comes, you can take some of that money and put it toward that investment opportunity, right? So just make sure you always have that reserve ready and available, right? In a high yield savings account of some sort, right? One of the other ways to protect yourself against to really think about the long term of us getting wealthy versus staying wealthy is, don't do the big bets. Don't do the one big bet risk. And Christina mentioned earlier about lotteries, and the number of people that play the lottery tickets. Um, you play the lottery thinking, okay, there's just that windfall is going to come. That windfall is going to come. The odds are very, 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 very slim that that windfall is going to come. Unless you have that secret rich uncle or aunt somewhere, the odds are that windfall is not coming. The odds are, spending that money over and over again on those tickets it's not gonna pay out. It's not gonna pay off. So I think something to be mindful of is that if a deal or for an investment sounds too good to be true, probably is, right? So just be mindful about that one big bet, and there's no guarantee when it comes to investing your money, right? Those things are often risky, and it often leads, unfortunately, to you being in a hole deeper than where you started. Right. Another thing about getting wealthy versus staying wealthy is, as you work on building your portfolio, as you work on building and accumulating wealth, make sure you go back and rebalance your portfolio, meaning that whatever you started out with in terms of your allocation. So maybe you started out investing and you have some money in your investment account, right? Well, don't just set it and leave it and don't look at it for 5 years. Every year, at a minimum, you should go in there and look at it, right? Make sure you go look at it. And if you don't know what you're looking at, it's so important for you to speak with somebody that does. You can come to us here, get a free financial plan, and we're more than happy to look at what it is that you're doing. We don't give investment advice, but what we are going to do is we are going to help you see, create a financial plan and help you see things and help educate you on what it is that you're looking at. And what that means is that we'll teach you about the stocks. We'll teach you about the different security types in your accounts. All right. And lastly, mindset shift from accumulation to preservation. We really want to make sure that you focus on, when it comes to getting wealthy versus staying wealthy, really focus your attention on legacy. And legacy doesn't necessarily mean, oh, I'm going to leave something to my kids. I'm going to leave something to my nieces, my nephews. Legacy really can be just, oh, you know what, I'm going to leave something to my alma mater because I enjoyed my time there and really proud to be a representative of that institution. I'm going to leave something to a cause that I really believe in, whether it's children, an organization that helps children, that helps animals, right, or helps the elderly, right. Your legacy matters. It really does matter, and one way to really help causes and things that you believe in, and the people that your loved ones, is really to make sure that you have a kind of a view about your wealth as like you're going to do your best to maintain it, right, and you're going to do your best to stay that way as you build it, right. And part of that is not taking the big risk, the big bet risk is not, part of that is really having kind of a 360 view of your finances, but a long-term view of your wealth. All right. Hopefully this has been helpful, guys. Hopefully you guys have learned something. Our goal here is just to educate you, to educate ourselves even on what our mindset and the role that our mindset really plays in wealth building, and it plays in just managing your money. Whether you have $1 or you have $100 billion, it doesn't matter. It's really important for us to really understand how our mindset plays a role in how we manage every single dollar or every single cent that comes our way. Our mindset can sometimes make or break our approach to wealth building and our approach to money management. So it's really important for us to really think about how that all works together. And as tomorrow, when you wake up and you're about to buy something, or you go out in the world and you're about to buy something, just think about how your mindset, and think about how you're doing what's called conscious spending. You're really being mindful and intentional about where you are allocating your dollars or your euros or wherever it is that you are in the world. All right. We want to thank you for joining us today. Christina, do you want to add anything before we close out?
Just, I mean, everything that we said, it can be summed up into being frugal financially, right? And allowing those, when you're frugal, not cheap, we're not saying that anyone is cheap, being frugal, you're being strategic about where your dollars are going, and allowing your money to grow for you. And so I think that this is great. Hopefully you guys will reach out to us, follow us on social media. We're at Total Alignment Charitable on Facebook, Instagram, as well as LinkedIn. So once again, Total Alignment Charitable on the social medias, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And please engage. We have a lot of good content that comes out. If there's also topics and things that you want to hear about, reach out to us, just send us a message and things of that nature. And just remember, if you qualify for a free financial plan, you can get one. And we want to talk about on this platform as well, not just things that to expose people. So even things you may not be aware of. Mina mentioned collectibles. We don't want you to feel, oh, well, that's too high for me. No, it doesn't matter where you are, where you start. You too can invest in collectibles one day. And it's all about learning the baby steps, right? And then building on that. And I'm going to turn it back to Mina to close us out.
Thank you. So she's absolutely right. Don't hopefully some of the things we share today, you don't feel like it doesn't apply to you. Our goal here is to educate. You may not be doing it today, but there's nothing that says you can't do it tomorrow or 10, 15, 20 years, however long you wish to take to invest in something like that. So again, what we do here is we are a nonprofit. We provide free financial plans and free personal finance education and free personal finance workshops. We partner with organizations that serve the community. So if you are an organization that serves the community and you'd like to have us come to you and speak with some of your people about personal finance, it's absolutely no cost to the individuals and no cost to the to the organization. We love to come and talk to you. So just can reach out. And if you do qualify for a free financial plan, visit our website, totalalignmentcharitable.org, and go ahead and click the get excuse me, get a plan link and submit your information, and we will be in touch to determine whether or not you qualify for the free plan. It's been a pleasure, guys. We will talk to you again soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yep. Thanks. Bye. Enjoy.